session of the 17th Kriha Summit. The session will be deliberating on navigating market mechanisms to ensure energy security. India is on a bold energy journey from the green hydrogen mission to smarter, resilient grids and a vision of 50% non-fossil power capacity by 2030 and becoming a net zero nation by 2070. As India accelerates towards a low-carbon future, effective market mechanisms are essential to ensure a secure, inclusive and just energy transition. On that note, I would now like to introduce our session chair and panelist. I invite our esteemed chair of the session, Mr. Anil Rastan Sir, former Secretary, Ministry of Power, Government of India. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Sir has served as a former Special Secretary to Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Power, Director, Energy Management Center, now Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and Director, Joint Director, Secretary, Department of Atomic Energy. An alumnus of St. Stephen's College and a gold medalist in law from Delhi University, he was also a visiting fellow at the University of Oxford. He has served in key leadership roles across India's energy sector, including as Chairman Haryana Power Generation Corporation, and has represented India at several international forums such as IEA and CSLF. He chaired the World Energy Council's Global Study on Energy for Megacities and currently serves as a scientific consultant for energy technologies to the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. An eminent energy expert, writer and consultant, Mr. Rastan also chairs the Energy and Environment Foundation and serves on the Executive Advisory Board of Virginia Mining Resources. We welcome you, sir. Thank you. I would now like to introduce our panelists of the session. We have with us Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Vice President, Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet India. Mr. Kumar is an Indian Revenue Service Officer of 1992 batch with a distinguished career spanning the Income Tax Department, Ministry of Power and Bureau of Energy Efficiency and has played a pivotal role in shaping India's energy efficiency landscape. As Secretary of BEE, he led major national program under the National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency, including the world's largest clean development mechanism lighting project. Later, as Managing Director of EESL, he successfully implemented transformative initiatives such as Ujala and Street Lighting National Program. At IIT Kanpur, alumnus with a Masters in Public Policy from GRIPS Tokyo, Mr. Kumar has also served the United Nations on environmental issues in the Asia-Pacific region. We welcome you, sir. Thank you. We have with us Ms. Namrata Mukherjee, Strategic Planning Specialist, International Solar Alliance. Ms. Mukherjee is an international expert in energy trade and investments with over 21 years of experience in climate change mitigation. She has extensively worked across renewable energy, energy efficiency, transmission systems, carbon markets, climate finance, and sustainable urban development. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Next we have is Ms. Gagandeep K. Buller, founder and CEO, Superhuman Race Private Limited. Ms. Buller is an Indian technologist and entrepreneur. She has represented India and Superhuman Race at the United Nations headquarters and contributed to policy dialogues with Commonwealth Secretary General, Indian Cabinet Ministers, and various government departments. Recognized among the CII Power 100, she was the only Indian woman CEO featured in a global study launched at the World Economic Forum 2023 in Davos. Earlier, she had held leadership roles with the Boeing company in India and North America. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Harsh Singhal, partner Prosper ET and board member TDS Industrial and Logistic Parks. Mr. Singhal is the co-founder of Prosper ET and a seasoned investment professional with over 19 years of experience across IFC and CDPQ. Earlier at IFC, Mr. Singhal played a key role in building the organization's renewables and clean tech portfolio and helped create Cube Highways, India's largest road platform developed under IFC's sustainability standards. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Mr. Peter Graham, our next panelist, a round of applause. He is the CEO of Global Buildings Performance Network with over 25 years of experience in sustainable building design, construction, and policy. His work spans from the construction site to international climate negotiations. He previously served as technical advisor and coordinator of the UNEP Sustainable Buildings and Climate Initiative, leading major global research and policy projects to advance low-carbon resilient construction. Through his roles in academia, international organizations, and industry collaborations, Dr. Graham continues to drive innovation and climate action in the global building sector. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for our dignitaries, our panelists here on the dais. Before we begin the session, I request our dignitaries to please gather for a group photograph. It will just take about 2 minutes. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I now invite Mr. Sri Anil Razdan sir to take the session forward. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Necessity from the kind of environmental issues that we are suffering from today, and those particularly living in the national capital region are fully aware that we have stepped into the severe category of pollution, and our lives are certainly at stake. What greater warning do we need for all this? The roads are clogged with traffic which is unmanageable. Sometimes we blame it on the festive season, sometimes we blame it on other issues. But the fact is that mobility has become a very major issue, and it's to mankind's, glory that we are one of the very few species that God created which refuses to organize ourselves for sustainability. I think starting from ants which move in a orderly fashion, live in an orderly fashion, be it bees, be animals, they all have a pattern of living and behavior which may be inimical to some of the other species that live on this planet. But I think qua themselves, they are not so inimical to each other. But some people attribute this to that we as races do not agree with each other. I don't agree with that. Some people say that economic levels or competition are a form of, conflict. But the fact remains that there's a lot to be done, and we as such, I think, a very onerous duty on this planet today, if we have to survive, I think, as a human race. The organizers had drawn up a concept note, I think, which was very, very pithy. And I thought that there are three aspects that we need to certainly understand or keep in mind. One is innovation, which they talk about, sustainability, and resilience. Now, if we have to act and innovate for a climate resilient world, I think it should run across civilizations. But forget global civilizations for a while. I think each one of us has a duty towards the local habitat or the larger habitat that we are living in. There was a beautiful example in the inaugural address given by a dignitary that Japan has stopped keeping public dustbins. Well, that was something that I was struck by also whenever I visited Japan in the past. That if anybody found any litter on the road, not even done by them, they would go and pick it up and put it appropriately or put it within their own bag. Go home and dispose it off. Now that is what is called community living and a sense of responsibility. The other was when they had Fukushima episode. Having been in atomic energy, I was rather curious about it. And there was a former chairman of the International Energy Agency from Japan, and he was my friend there and a host. So I was at an event post my retirement from government, and I found that I couldn't sleep at night. Okay. So number one, Japanese had altered their designs, keeping in view their average height, so the ceilings are low. Otherwise, I found it very warm. So I went out for a stroll around midnight for about half an hour, till I got tired and came back and slept. Next year I asked him. He said post Fukushima, because of the energy crisis, they had set a parameter of 26 degrees centigrade as the air conditioning temperature. You can't go below that. But people in Japan and institutions had voluntarily set it at 28. So 2 degrees higher than what the government had prescribed. Now that kind of a collective response to a situation or an emergency is a very elementary thing that I think is being asked of each human being or as a citizen. There are certain local issues, we have to respond to that. We don't have to wait for enforcement agencies to enforce the law. The first law to be enforced is by yourself. That is where I think it begins. But when we talk of these three concepts that I mentioned, innovation, sustainability, resilience, that the organizers have talked about, innovation, of course, across sectors, it's a driving force, we said, for the most beneficial future. Yes, you keep innovating. Today, because circumstances change, your habitat changes, you can't have one prescription for everybody, just as a doctor cannot prescribe one medicine for any kind of ailment. So this is where I think the local society and its response and the role of local governments, I think, comes into play, or local self-governance. That I find is the greatest weakness of at least the Indian governance or administrative culture. We expect the government of India to lay down something or those standards. Well, each situation, as I said, is peculiar in itself, and that applies to any country. I'm only giving you a situation because, barring Peter, no other panelist, I think, is a foreigner, unless Ms. Muller is one. Because she's been advising Boeing and all that, so I thought she would be a very global personality. So anyway, so that is where I think our local self-government and local responsibility is the weakest, and neighborhood comes down to them to the neighborhood. So that's the first thought that I want to leave with you. Sustainability says must respond, adapt, and recover, and thrive among shocks. Certainly. That if we have to sustain ourselves, we have to sustain ourselves as a human race. We've got to change according to the need. The lawmaker doesn't have to tell us first responses to come from the citizen himself. Now, if that is missing, I think somewhere there is a gap in our thinking. Next is resilience, ensures robustness and adaptability. I think that is precisely what any situation demands. That you cannot have one law to fit everybody. You cannot have one edict given out for all times. It has to change. And then, above all this, I think, is your ability to be able to afford a solution. That is something I think which that particular society or governance has to keep in mind. The least cost option, number one. Number two is a solution which fits you, and that must come from the people themselves. Now, these are some of the thoughts I thought, you see, which have been highlighted by the organizers, and I think very ably done by them. There are issues which we will need as we move forward, but we're looking for a low carbon future. And in this particular session, what are the effective market mechanisms to ensure that to happen? Now that is where I find myself honestly at a loss in the Indian context. Do we have a market mechanism? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm too old. I thought I was carrying a lot of wool in my head. So before coming here 2 days back, I asked him to chop off whatever little wool there was. Maybe some wisdom will emerge, but in the last 48 hours, that's no light at the end of the tunnel. I would say that enhancing energy efficiency, I've been a great votary of that. Some people like Saurabh who work with me know that as Director of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, when I was Joint Secretary, that time an insistence started. That is consumer guidance and participation in energy efficiency. And when I ask the big names, I don't want to use them, lest I offend them. Why don't you have star rating on your refrigerators, air conditioners, and other things? They say, we don't need this. Our name sells. We have enough advertisement budgets to convince people to buy our product. Now that is not Miss India or Miss World. Even there you have some specifications, I'm told, though I don't know. So, but ultimately, when you make a bold move and you make the citizen participate in that education program, he will respond. But what does the government do? The government failed on that. I tried as secretary that there should be a differential duty structure for star labeled products. And my own batchmate and colleague was the finance secretary, the revenue secretary. So he was a person concerned. I made 3 trips to him. And I thought that he must be thinking I'm a pest. And to oblige me, he told one of his joint secretaries that you must add something. When the budget was announced, there was one great concession that was announced. And that concession was that I think in high volume meat refrigeration vessels which are importing meat products to India, the duty structure should come. I think the revenue man did his job, found which is going to have the least impact on revenue, and he selected that item. He did his job, but I failed. Thereafter, I think, but it is the public, you see, which has to demand, which is not demanding. That's what I want to highlight to you, that you must realize it's bad for you, bad for your progeny, and bad for your race. And you have to move in that direction. So I would say that in all this, how do you show one or two more points before I take my seat? I think one is a tax signal, one is a price signal. Whatever you want to encourage should, in my view, be priced cheaper so that you get people to use it. And this I can tell you is something which Vanaspati, how it was promoted before I was born. My grandfather used to tell me that they would, in fairs and all in Lahore and Delhi, distribute puris made in that ghee free. So anyway, so price is a signal. That if you get it at lower price or something, you switch to that. The other is, I think, soft credit. I don't see soft credit coming for labeled appliances. There is no credit or a financial linkage to the pollution that you are causing. That awareness, I think, has to come in. And I would say there has to be a ceiling on the consumption of that somehow. In a third step. How do you bring a market mechanism into all this? And that is something which I couldn't decipher. And I hope my panel will make me wiser. I think rest we will leave as we get along. And I think maybe how do you want to be in your midst? Yeah, I'll sit there, otherwise I look like a class teacher or something. So I don't want to do that. We want to participate. And we have a time allotted to us. 45 minutes. So we'll have about 5 or 7 minutes freewheeling for everybody, and then we get along. There is a lot to be discussed, but I think at the core of all this, at least personally, I would say that how do we enforce this? We have the laws, we know what to do. But what is the implementation strategy in your view? And how do we keep updating that strategy? Because there's one thing that I was once told, post-retirement, I was chairing some panel, and what is not measured does not get done. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks. And first, thank Priya Council for inviting me. So I'd like to pick up from a very important point that you just mentioned, that where is the market? only if we have a market, we can have a market mechanism. And I'm now restricting myself to India and also to the electricity market. Now, if you look at the electricity market, just about 5% of electricity is traded on the exchange. So, in a sense, there is no market. So, how do we create a mechanism to do energy security or anything otherwise if you don't have a market? And then let's try and decipher what does it take to make a market. And sir, I think you started this off when you were in Power Ministry. You commissioned a study by Nobel Military to create a digitization for the electricity sector. That report is still there somewhere. But I think it is the time now to pick up that report, look at India's growing innovation in the fintech sector. And I'll digress for a moment as to what are the 2-3 things that have happened well in that sector. That now today we have the largest, I think 1/3 of financial transactions in the world happen in India. How did this revolution happen? One, of course, is by consumer participation. So, to my mind, there are 2 or 3 basic things that you need to create. First, a unique digital identity for each and every market participant. Very simple. I have a UPI, I have a PAN, I have a communication device. Number 2 is an open communication. You have Wi-Fi, you have internet, no problems of access. And the third is an open market. That is how these Amazons of the world have really. So, can we try and create these in the electricity market? Possibly yes. And why it is needed when we talk about energy security, we know energy security for a country like India can only happen when we increase our domestic generation and reducing reliance on oil and gas that we import and other things. And I think a scheme that has really come up is the PM Surya scheme, where almost 2 million rooftops have got installed in the last 1 year, and the promise is to go by 10 million. But then, can I trade, if I have a rooftop, you have a rooftop, can I trade between the two of us? No. And why is that? Why is it happening? There is no unique digital identity. I have a CA number, I have a meter number, but it is not digitized. Can we think of creating a digital energy grid, virtual grid, which each and every asset has a unique digital identity? There is communication because I still have a mobile. I can transact. And then I try and open up, deregulate the market. If you look at, it's a very interesting electricity market. You have generation side, transmission side, you have maybe Fortune 500 companies doing extremely well, both in public and private sector. And look at the distribution sector. The accumulated losses is 7.5 lakh crores, close to $100 billion. Accumulated debt of nearly the same amount. About to really, I mean, it's very difficult. Every 3-4 years you hear of a dole coming from Government of India, something that Sir also mentioned. The report that another $10 to $15 billion is going to be pumped in. So is this something sustainable? Quite frankly, what can be done and what should be done is to first digitize the grid, create avenues, share data. I mean, one thing that has happened in the innovation ecosystem is that data is available. Once you have data available, there is an open market. I am pretty sure you have a UPI kind of a structure in India, and in fact, Military has been talking about it for some time now. A unified energy interface, which is kind of a transaction between participants at a retail level, digital energy grid. There's an India energy stack. But I think what is needed is you have to embed first a digital twin, as we call it, for the distribution utility. It is absolutely not digitized. Let me tell you, high voltage transmission is fully digitized, and that's the reason why you have wholesale markets which are still there. So, to my mind, sir, if we were to create a market mechanism, the government has to lead the way, both at the state and the central level, to create this enabling IT infrastructure, the digital public infrastructure, as we call it. Create ways in which you share anonymized data so that you get people to come and participate. And then, of course, all these things that you very rightly pointed out about the appliances. We can have a demand response program, we can have demand equipment replacement programs, and so on and so on. But to my mind, that's the only way in which we can move towards a market mechanism, and that will really take us closer to what we want as far as energy security is concerned.
You mentioned about this digital transactions. But I think the constraint here is that we must recognize that electricity at the moment can only move through physical wires. For the last 5-6 years, I've been trying to get speakers who claim that low voltage electricity can be transmitted across the ether. Well, that would be news to me. Otherwise, each one of you is in danger of electrocution. You don't need guns. So, how can we possibly, in a structure like this, in a commodity like electricity, have this kind of a digitalized relationship between two individuals?
So let me try and answer.
Yes.
I was not suggesting wireless at all. If you look at the genesis of the regulations of the electricity sector, not just in India, globally, why it is so regulated is because I'm sitting as a head of a DISCOM or a secretary or a regulatory commission chairman. I have no idea what are the number of distribution transformers, whether they have the load carrying capacity, and therefore an elaborate system of checks is done when you apply for a new connection or anything. But when you digitize everything, you have the knowledge that, let's say, in this area of Lodi Road, I have spare capacity, and therefore these three individuals staying here can actually transact. Now, this is a real-time information possible only when you have a digital public infrastructure. And unlike the financial part, there will be two transactions. One is a technical settlement, which is settlement which looks at the technical viability of the buyer and seller.
Sustainability of the transaction.
Absolutely. And the financial transaction. So that's what I was saying.
Okay. Any other thoughts you have on this? I think I had something lined up for you. And that is, you see that in this financing part, there is an issue that organizations need to keep in mind. Anyway, I think as we move along, we'll get to you. Now, Namrata, would you have something to say on the matter and your view?
Sure. Thank you so much, Razdan sir. And this is exactly what I expected. It was like an unscripted sort of an extempore panel. Kept asking her, what is the script? What is the script? Whether this is right. No, please, it's fine. No, but I think this is more enjoyable, and I've kept my favorites. So I will try and speak what comes to me. No, I'm not. It's okay. So what I'm going to do is just try and connect what you spoke in the beginning about innovation, and I'll connect it to market mechanisms because that's the topic of our panel. And I'll just split it into parts. One is what has worked well for us here in India from so as to say the market mechanisms. You're right, we don't have a market, and exactly what Mr. Saurabh Kumar has also alluded. We don't have the market definition in its exact nature. But I'll try and give some of what has worked well in India. And in the second part, I'll talk about what can be done better. Because that was your question, right? How can you make things more implementable and what more can we do? So for the first part of it, look, I think if we look at the last 20 years of the power sector's story, like ever since the Electricity Act of 2003, and where it has moved from there to where we have come here in 2025. And I think it's a story to be told to the rest of the world, and that's at least what we are trying to do on behalf of International Solar Alliance as Global South leadership. is if you look at the story of solar and transmission, I don't take solar separately because for large scale solar and the capacity where we've reached here in India, which is close to 2 gigawatts of solar capacity, there is a very close connectedness of how innovations have brought in private sector players into this sector, and how it's like a virtuous cycle, how they keep bringing in more innovation. And when I talk about innovation, it is not about only technology innovation. Here we are talking about innovations from the ecosystem. It has been from policy to contract formation, to looking at how PPAs are drafted, and it's been a process in itself because we've seen the public and the private sector work together while the policy formulation was taking place and while the contracts were being formed. Because this story of where India has reached in its renewable energy capacity is something which has been worked together by the government and the private sector. And for me, that's a story which is to be told to the world. Because last year when I was in the US, I had gone for a IBLP leadership program. And when I was talking to my other co-participants who were from the Indo-Pacific region, from South Korea, from Japan, and they were like, "What are you saying? Is India one of the leaders? How?" And I was shocked and surprised that these are people who are working in the ministry in their respective countries asking about India's story. So I think this is why we haven't moved the market way, but I think our contract, the way they are structured, the institutional framework, it's about the ecosystem creation, and markets don't stand alone. It's really all players together who work towards creating a favorable system for more private-public partnership in the sector. This is one example. The other example, and a sector where I work very closely about, is power transmission in India. Again, a very unique example where you have private players competing with large public sector entities like Power Grid in creating infrastructure. And how does that help? Because globally, if you look at it, power transmission is a public monopoly, right? It is, the infrastructure is created by government. But if you look at India, and since competition was introduced in 2011, way back in 2011, what has happened is over the years we've realized that when you bring public and private sector to compete together, costs come down automatically and efficiencies come into the system. So I think that example of power transmission, the way the transmission network has been built out in India, which has allowed for a lot of solar power to be off-taken from places where the resource is very rich to places which are the load centers, only because of a very robust power transmission infrastructure that we've built, which has again been possible because of public-private partnership. So for me, that first part of the question of how innovation market mechanisms work, I think we are making a step in the right direction by bringing in private sector innovation in the way in which at least the generation of the transmission side of the story is panning out in India. But the second part, which is what can be done more, is really the market side of it, which where we are struggling now. And if you look at the solar story, what has not worked well and where we are now inching towards is more around the decentralized solar applications, right? Rooftop is one space, now we're suddenly picking up, but there's a lot more which can be done. And really distributed renewable energy, solar rooftops, you call it agricultural solar, applications, all of that makes sense when you have local markets that are being able to, because it's very difficult for a central mechanism to come in and move around local power offtake. That's one area. And second area, Mr. Saurabh has already alluded, which is the distribution sector, because offtake and consumers' first point is distribution companies. So how do you address the distribution companies' financial status? Is something, to be honest, I don't have an answer for. But I think one right step in that direction is to how do you equip them with the right data, the right tools, so that they are able to see, what are the losses, where are the improvements possible. So I will stop there.
I think, Namrata, you see, you have a global outreach, and Saurabh also has worked across these sectors. Now, for anything to succeed on a larger scale, I think you need a pilot somewhere and some demonstration projects, because nothing can happen without financing. And nobody would like to put his money into that basket without knowing that it will come back. So my advice to the ISA and to people like NS, that create a few pilots show that it can work, that will bring confidence into the system. And once you show that it can work, then the momentum picks up. Now, something that I was taught way back in 1974 when I had my first independent charge, the services, that as a pilot, be unfair to nature, pick up something that will succeed, be selective. Because if your first is a failure, you will never be able to go up again. So I think the perfect case of collaboration, that you need to collaborate with financing agencies and pick up a few pilots in different regions of the country and across different economic groups. So what succeeds will itself proliferate. You will not need to. What fails, yes, there should be an emergency team to immediately examine where we have gone wrong and be honest to yourselves and self-correct. But that is a strategy, I would say that. I'm sorry to interrupt this interesting discussion. I think Harsh has to go away somewhere. You have to leave early, and I think we give you the first choice to go ahead because I'm an unemployed man. Time has no value.
Having me here. I think this is a very interesting discussion. I think we're all talking of energy efficiency, and one of the challenges which we have always faced, and this is not from today. I've been looking at this space for the last 10 years. Is the problem in the whole energy efficiency space, and here I'm talking more of the ESCO as a model, is that you have an ESCO and you want to sell your solution to a building provider, but the building provider says that my tenant doesn't really care, and that's where the whole story kind of ends. And then when I see actually how the whole some of the distributed solar CNI kind of investments actually took off, is when corporates had their own incentives in terms of reporting requirements, etc., that how much of renewable energy they buy. So what we've been thinking is, when we go to now, there are so many of these Fortune 500 companies who are tenants of the dealer. But why is it that these companies are not pushing together to have does the answer lie in pushing those companies to report on energy efficiency, or it's something else? Probably something needs to be thought about. Right? I think that is something which, at a large scale, we need to think about.
See, you are a business developer, and as far as I know, your group is very professionally done. The problem is that you raised our urban infrastructure. I know too much about Gurgaon, so I will not get granular on that. I used to be administrator of that place in 1977. I hope you were born by that time. Anyway, now the whole problem is that it's number one, money must come back. And maximum money must come back. Number two, even if it means bribing someone, let's be very clear about it. Number two, what is our model? Is it Manhattan? Is it Gandhigram? What precisely? Now, who decides what is to be done? It's a very difficult choice to make because you want to go global, you want to prosper, you naturally pick up a model which gives you the highest return. Now, this is where I think you see our building laws and urban laws, I would say, need to change. That if this is one of the issues, global warming today, that's why we are here discussing this. What is your negative contribution to the system? And there are penny points for that. Now, if you can convince somebody to develop an urban settlement based on such principles, and then introduce also a parameter that how is the health of people improved, that gives you a positive. Now that kind of a rethinking on modeling is something like progressive companies like you can think of and take the risk and say, look here, enough is enough, folks. We want to live longer. Are you prepared for that? Would you be able to offer this organization, Griha or Terry, that I'm prepared to work on such a model, give them a model that will work. Let's do it. Let's not talk about it.
So I give you one specific example, sir. I think you hit a very important point. And at least for us, what we are doing in our investment decisions is we actually have two layers of capital. One is the capital which you said in terms of very focused on commercial returns, profitable. But we also have a layer which actually allows us to take more risk, right? So that's how you basically start investing in some of these areas which are slightly early on or perceived as risky in many of these cases. You hit another very important point in terms of building code. I think what we are seeing from our vantage point is that the building material aspect itself has a huge scope for carbon efficiency. And what unfortunately is being seen is that these things are always thought as an afterthought. We have been working with a company which is into ultra high performance concrete. What it actually means is that you actually need 30% less cement for 30% less steel when you're building anything, infrastructure, building, etc. Now, the problem is, of course, as you said, the laws are not very clear, but more importantly, the incentives are not clear enough. And I think the third thing, of course, is I think you touched the point in terms of the pilot, is that I will say, okay, my solution will help you last a little longer. But the point is that people need to see that for many years before they get conviction. But I think long story short, I think a lot of these design solutions are coming up. And I think we need to look at it more at an aggregate level, especially in the building side of it, as a policy side, that how do we push some of these building solutions into the industry at a large scale? Do we have, sort of a PLI for building solutions sort of program? So I think those things need to come out. I think what we as a country, we always think of things later, right? The world has come to a point where we need to think of things at design. That's
Harsh, I think I would only conclude by saying that I'm sure if you will give a proposition of this type, that you're willing to do a pilot with somebody and let this organization, Griha, or whatever you want to call it, push that or even tell it. And here is something, there are some, and I have greater faith in the younger generation, because their future is at stake. They need to be more conscious. And you bring that proposition, give it to the ministry. You heard the secretary is a very progressive person. And give it, because you see, we must move away from a regime before you close. I'll let you close. That is, you see, I think the year was 1988. I was heading the Haryana Urban Development Authority. And said external development charges have to be paid by the then licensing developers. And that amount was not very large. At that time, it was 450 crores for a limited area of Gurgaon. I was told, but we paid 30 crores to the chief minister for his election. I said, sorry, you paid him. So the result was I was transferred. But I had a minister who put in his resignation early morning at 6 in the morning to the chief minister. And he was controlling 5 departments of the government. The chief minister had to take back his orders because there would be a furor. And today that place has progressed because the infrastructure is there. What was that for? It was for making drinking water. It was for building electricity systems. So what you need is transparency and public education. I'm sure that with the spread of education, if people come to know something, that this is the truth, I'm sure you will get support. And there's money in honest business, but you have to be patient. Thank you very much. And we move on to Gagandeep. So Gagandeep, go ahead. You are from a very lucrative field. You are a tech entrepreneur, how can data-driven platforms be used, etc.
Thank you, sir.
You're a high flyer, you've been with Boeing, I think, or something. Superhuman. Really?
Yes. Great, thank
First of all, let me tell the audience that her name should not be pronounced as Pullar. It is Pullar.
That's right. It is Pullar, yes. Thank you, sir. So these are very inspiring remarks from around the room, and I was just penning down my thoughts, and I think I've run out of the length of the paper now, so this is quite exciting. I will start with data because I think all the speakers touched on it, but I will also go back to the 3 themes, sir, that you opened with. So innovation, sustainability, and resilience. A big part of resilience for us today, like Sir said, especially for my generation, that is, either stepping into the workforce or has young children, is what is the future of our children going to look like in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And I think that one of the most overlooked simplifications of our times is the degree Celsius target that we've taken. And it's an overlooked opportunity because it happened after air conditioning was introduced. So on your air conditioner, you can modulate the temperature. So I was talking about 26 and 28 degrees Celsius, which is a 2 degrees Celsius difference. And we've done 5, 6 degrees Celsius through the day in cities like Delhi. And so 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius has no meaning for us. For most of us, it does not elicit any sense of danger. And that's because of the remote control in our hands. That's the desensitization that we've developed. But in reality, if we were to look at scientific models, so along with data, we work on a lot of original research. And I don't come from the space of sustainability, I come from aerospace, like Sir mentioned right now. Aerospace is highly scientific, it's very, very predictable, it's very regulated because it puts lives of people at risk, like we know very well now. And so how do you sort of take sustainability, which when you were talking about reporting highly assumption-based, to risk, which is based on physical phenomena which are repeatable. They are physical science phenomena, they don't follow geopolitics or any other things that man has made, right? And so when we started developing global models about 5 years ago, taking geospatial data and just running machine models on top of them with global constraints, we had 2 important realizations. One is that if you look at India and you look at the whole globe, it puts things in perspective. There is so much talk about our air pollution and the risk that we are in, but extreme weather events are not happening in India. Where's the proof of the pudding? If we are at so much risk, why aren't there more tsunamis, floods, any wildfires, extreme weather events, right? There aren't as many other parts of the world. When we built the first machine models, we actually found that certain parts of the world are disadvantaged compared to us. So the 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius simply comes from two things. One part of it we understand to some extent, which is the anthropogenic GHG emissions. So man-made emissions, when they go into the atmosphere, when they stay concentrated in the atmosphere, they increase the temperature. And this is my theory, so maybe you should not quote it, but my theory is that temperature anomaly is actually an indicator of physical system entropy. Entropy in physical systems means that it is irreversible. If I get to a point where the disorderliness has set in to an extent that it cannot be reversed, orderliness will never return. There might be a new orderliness, but the old orderliness will never return. So one part of it is the emissions, but the second part of it is the baseline. And India, because we started our development journey late, we have the opportunity to build green. And because our baseline was higher, our temperature anomaly is much lower than many developed countries of the world. What that means is that India is primed for development today. We are primed to build infrastructure, we are primed for an era of abundance. And I want to start with that because I think when we discuss market mechanisms and we discuss green premiums, we think that naturally it's not going to work because we are a price sensitive market. But we will not be price sensitive in the future. And the youth is not price sensitive today. Just look around, college students have iPhones, everybody is buying the most expensive cosmetics. We have a startup that is now a unicorn that only sells expensive cosmetics, Nykaa. And so, we are looking at a paradigm shift in the country that we are. But we also have two countries. So we have a very rural ecosystem and then we have this aspirational urban ecosystem. And so with that, I think I'll talk about my second point, which also I think is related to some of the themes that my very august panelists, I think, have built today. I think there are different solutions at every level. From the policy point of view, I 100% agree with the remarks about transparency. And I think that policy will need to be very dynamic in the future. In the past, I think we've had, some kind of stability with climate naturally. We've also had, incremental economic growth. And we've had predictable population growth, even though it has been high, but all of it has been very predictable. Because we are going towards unpredictability, I think that the government using artificial intelligence, machine modeling, all kinds of technology, going from reports to instantaneous real-time visibility will be critical. I was actually having a conversation, this might be a little far out for today, but I was discussing with my co-founder who's an energy expert. I was saying, why are energy tariffs primed for access even today, rather than being primed for some kind of sustainability or opportunity, right? And what I mean by that is that maybe our tariffs need to go to the tax that you pay on the income that you earn, rather than just making the unit. Because if you actually think about it, for an urban household or for a large conglomerate that is producing steel or cement or whatever, what is the percentage of the cost of electricity that you pay? But the moment you link it to the money that you're making, will people not be interested in efficiency anymore? Will they naturally not think that, rather than paying 1% or 2% over my regular tax rate, that 1% or 2% could be thousands of crores, would they not then prioritize efficiency? So I think the regulator today is in a hot seat. The hot seat has emerged because the market is transforming. New innovation is available. There is some resistance to that innovation. And so the regulator must innovate, I think, based on real-time visibility to data. My second sort of contribution today that I would like, especially everyone in the audience, to sort of keep close to their hearts is I do feel that India needs to spend more time in the lab, period. All kinds of R&D are good R&D today. There cannot be, we are sitting on heaps of coal reserves today. We are building solar capacity and wind capacity continuously. But I think being in the lab means that if we know, I was discussing this with Sir, that if we know that The maximum we've reached is 30% capacity for a solar asset. How do I build an asset which has more capacity, which is infrastructure light, which does not require rare earth elements? So another thing that I'll tell you is what I worry about because I do read a lot about these things, is in order to produce any electric vehicles, to produce infrastructure that powers renewable energy, you actually use a completely different material stack. That material stack is extremely intensive. So it can be 1.4x of your regular material stack in terms of the embodied emissions that it brings. Now, I don't know if the life of the assets that we are building today warrants that extra embodied carbon. And I do know for a fact that we don't have the closed loop circular economy. So how do we infuse that in our economy? How do we do the regional trickle down by building circular economy centers which could potentially, create innovators who could replicate it in any part of the world, right? Like imagine being able to recover silver or rare earth elements which are depleting in, you know, the production that is happening globally and increasing in value every day. It could set us up for success and it could set those innovations up for like a very bright future ahead, right? So I do think that there's a lot of time that we need to spend in the lab thinking deeply about these problems and connecting, which is my third point, connecting innovation with business models. What are the business models of the future and how do we create a win-win-win for the regulator, for the private player, for even the smallest player in that thread, right? Which could be an MSME or even a farmer. So another thing that I was discussing with Sir before the panel started was that is it okay to extend the definition of energy in this conversation? Can we go beyond electricity? Because if we think about our rural ecosystem, which has so many farmers, we know that there are more airlines now and there are more people zooming around the world than there have ever been. We know there is pressure on sustainable aviation fuel and we know that we have an agrarian economy. It's the perfect opportunity. How about you put centers of producing SAF, which is anyway supposed to be on a local stack, right? So the local crop produce, it's going to be produced mainly from some crop but also perhaps some waste. And then how do you sort of build that flywheel, right? So you are increasing the income of the farmer. You're making the farmer capable of then, accessing more energy, kids getting educated, and so on, right? So how do you create flywheels in the economy which incentivize every player? The farmer benefits, the MSME that is producing the SAF benefits because he has, definite, even if airlines are not able to buy his complete stock, I'm sure that automobiles will move in the same direction. We will have enough and more cars, and somebody should come up with how do we retrofit cars. Rather than scrapping cars, we should be retrofitting them to take different kinds of fuel, right? And so, yeah, I do think that we are heading towards an era of great abundance, great opportunity, and therefore we must leverage that opportunity with innovation and visibility.
Jagandeep, my thing you see is that nothing gets done. You measure it or you put a monetary value to it. So in your exposition, what mechanism would you present for a practical governance point? Government has to collect taxes. How should it collect taxes? You want the environment to be clean. You want people to be more prosperous, the economy to grow. Now, how do these different things come in? I think, first of all, you need transparency, you need interconnectivity, and public awareness. Thank you, Harsh. Please, please do. क्या इनको कोई पगड़ी पहनानी है तो पहना लो.
Nastan sir to please felicitate our dignitary or panelist here, Mr. Harsh Singhal. Round of applause for Mr. Harsh Singhal. Thank you. citizen of green mega city. Thank you.
Sorry. So you see, we get back to that point that having been an administrator, I'm looking for if you can suggest quickly, some model that you have in mind which is implemented. Now, should it be done at local level, state level, or country level? Because everybody, governments run on money. They need to collect money. People need to get money to invest again into that project which is more viable. At the same time, society says, no, ये नहीं कर सकते तुम. So those being the rules of the game, and for sustainability, can you quickly suggest one or two examples of what you were suggesting?
So thank you for the opportunity, sir. Actually, I'll speak quickly about it. So, sir, we imagined a digital public infrastructure which we started developing as an unfunded mandate to begin with. Now we are beginning to pilot it. And so what came out of that was that at the asset level, so at a Tata Steel plant level or a Dalmia cement plant level or any other asset level, you can see the emissions and the climate risk corresponding to that. Historically, emissions accounting for hard-to-abate sectors or for any sector has always been bottom-up. But our hypothesis was that if we use geospatial data and put models on top of it, because the greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere and observable, it will be more accurate and benchmarkable to get this data. Once we got this data, we validated it with industry, sir. And today we are at a point where we'll be setting off on a pilot which will enable a market model. How is that market model possible? Our research showed that developers have actually paid anywhere between 1x to 3x for the same commodity in the last 2 to 3 years. However, when you ask them the question that would you pay a green premium for green, they say no, I can't pay a 4 to 6% green premium. And the commodity manufacturer says that the government must subsidize my installation of green technology. But when you put all the data there, where at the asset level you can see the emissions, you can see the risk, the buyers in the room, the sellers in the room, the regulators in the room, the solution that emerges will have revenue for the government, green premium for the seller, and confidence for the buyer that what I am buying is in fact green. And this is possible because it is a fully transparent DPI. Anybody can go there and see, what is it that is attributable to this asset, and they can compare it with other assets like that asset.
Sorry, Peter, I'll take just a minute more. A very interesting one. You see, you need, I think, 2 or 3 things. One is that governments will look for money. And for any transaction or any business, you look for money somewhere because that is the only commodity that can move freely. The other is that there is a moral side to it, which you can say relate to health issues, particularly as we are talking of environment today. Now that is what is the toxicity and effect on health. How do you display that? And possibly a third thing is that what have you done to effect any improvement in your behavior or in your emissions? First of all, I think you need to display pollution. You need to display this thing. We have a situation where pollution monitors or display signs in the city were reportedly switched off in the worst times. You need vehicles which tailpipe emissions. When I was secretary, they were wanting what is the gases content. I said, look here, no. As far as efficiency is concerned, you go by the fuel consumption. And that can be a regular parameter for efficiency. Fuel is one, but a time has come because we have that with your digitized technology, why can't you show compulsorily, just as you show his registration plate, that what is his pollution plate at the moment. And what is contribution marketing? So it's basically naming and shaping. And if you have a conscience as an intelligent human being and a society, you need to build more of that. I think now I'll move on to Peter because he's been waiting here for long.
Thank you very much. I guess it may require a bit of international context to this discussion. Our organisation, UPN, is working in the world's fastest urbanising markets and amongst the world's most vulnerable communities to try and decarbonise the building sector. And we generally focus on policy reform, and we are working in Indonesia, in Africa, in the Pacific Islands and the Caribbean, and of course here in India. Dr. Sunil Purushottam's there taking a photograph, which is our managing director here. Why India? So India is internationally significant when it comes to driving down emissions, particularly from the building sector. India is the fourth largest source of building sector emissions, and is currently got an urbanisation rate, new construction rate, which is 1.5 times faster than China. By 2050, India will be having an urbanisation rate double China. And in fact, the only two other areas on the planet that will have comparable new construction rates are Indonesia and the African continent. So when we talk about is there a market, that is a huge opportunity and a worrying threat. So if we have a fabulous opportunity, if we can have effective implementation of zero emissions building regulations, policies which enable investment in sustainable buildings at scale, we can actually bend that curve. Most of the buildings which are going to be standing in 2050 need to be built. So this is really an amazing point. Perhaps it is the sort of real, what you call abundance, the potential abundance. But of course, with that is the threat that if we don't get ahead of that urbanisation curve with effective implementation of policies and technologies and mobilising finance, then we're going to be locking in a tragedy, I would say. Not just in India, this is in all of the countries that I mentioned. And so the question has been raised, how do we push, Harshi's left now, he said, how do we push at speed and scale? And what's being overlooked? And so one of the things that we can see in the work that we do, particularly we're working on helping the private sector achieve its zero emissions commitments in the building sector. And there's a real lack of urgency amongst the companies. Climate change seems distant. Maybe it's the 1.5 awareness or whatever it is. It doesn't seem to be a near and present threat. There's a lot of money to be made with maintaining the status quo, and quite a lot of inertia. So we need a holistic strategy to be able to deal with that. And we see this in all the countries that we work in. We need what we call the sticks, the carrots, and the tambourines. We need the effective building regulations. We need to have the policy, we need to have the financial incentives, which are the carrots. And we have to have the tambourines, which is the education, the recognition of high performance, and certainly the knowledge exchange. You mentioned pilots, and I agree. We need to be able to see real change on the ground, and the building sector is incredibly parochial. So unless it's happening in your city or your town, you don't believe it's real. So you do have to have pilots. There are many pilots. We're not at a point where we're wondering what we need to do to decarbonise buildings. We know why we need to do it. We know what we need to do, and we know how to do it. The pilots are there, but who's going to do it at scale? And that's the real question that the GBPN is focusing on at the moment. Who are the people that do the change we need to see in the building sector? And in our world, these people are the small to medium enterprises They're the municipal and state agencies that are responsible for adopting and implementing building regulations. And in general, the players in the mass market that don't really have the resources to get the training in high performance buildings and so forth. We need to have boots on the ground in local communities, and we need to be there for the long haul. So our kind of modus operandi, and local is a key word here, is to have a global network of local experts. So we can have knowledge exchange between pilots in emerging markets. You know, we've seen a lot of great examples of so-called best practices coming from Europe, for example, or from the United States, that don't necessarily fit what's happening here in India or what's happening in Indonesia. I mean, European cities are very different from Delhi or Jakarta. And so we need to have a way of being able to identify what's actually working in these markets and have a much more direct and rapid knowledge exchange between stakeholders at that level of action. And so that's the kind of thing that we're setting up, global network of local experts, really focusing on driving implementation forward.
You see, we are, I think, writing on the wall is that we're going to have a lot of AI centers. We're getting them. That is, it's clearly on the horizon. And there could be huge energy guzzlers and emitters. And we can also, we know roughly the locations where they're going to be. Do you have any suggestion from your international experience of what would be the ideal parameters for an AI center?
No.
Or what should be the norms? And is anybody working on it?
I mean, this is a great question because I think it speaks to something that is an elephant in many rooms that we work in, and that is, what are we actually optimizing for? You know, if we are, we've seen all sorts of different kinds of building types that we want to make energy efficient. We don't ask the question, are they the best? Are they the kind of buildings that we should be building? AI data centers, sure, they're an immense kind of time bomb in terms of potential energy demand, water demand, and so on. You know, how do we address the demand for that? And I'm sure there's going to be some innovations in data processing that can reduce that demand. But I want to flip the question a little bit, just to look at the alternative. So one of the other big things that's occurring in the world is a housing affordability and availability crisis. And on the point that you had before about measure what matters. And so just a quick example from India. We have been involved in supporting work on building codes and other things in India since 2014. And it's a very slow adoption rate at the state level. And we've been working on this and working on this. So since 2014 to 2021, 22, we're working on energy efficiency and climate as a resident edge.
But what do you suggest? I mean, I agree with you.
I'm getting to it. So
how do we go about it?
Yeah. So we decided to look at what are the standards which states have actually already adopted, and let's work to optimise those. Ventilation standards came up. What we do is we go and we measure the thermal environment, and we were focusing on the PMAYU projects in Gujarat. What we found was that the average internal temperature in summer was around about 37 degrees Celsius. We interviewed the occupants of those buildings, and we found that they were suffering immensely due to discomfort of heat, increased incidence of domestic violence, chronic diseases, and so on. That data of the human impact of poor energy efficiency and poor climatic design was a much better motivator for policy reform than reducing greenhouse gas emissions and looking at the thermal envelope. And so we developed a set of healthy housing guidelines, and some of the recommendations are now made into the new revision of the National Building Code. So the point is, whether it's we need to ask ourselves the questions: what are the priority building types for humans that we should be really making sure are optimal? And if we measure what matters rather than the sort of the indicators of performance, like kilowatt hours per square meter or what have you, it's not meaningful. But if we measure, incidents of heat-related domestic violence or deaths in buildings towards heat waves and so on, that addresses the issue I mentioned at the beginning, which is the sort of lack of a sense of urgency. And it also it also provides, I would imagine, to the private sector a signal as well that there is significant consequences for building bad, but massive opportunities for building well.
Peter, you see, you doctor say this domestic violence, behavior at home, what is with attitudinal problems. Now, domestic violence may not be on account of living conditions. It could be on account of a bad boss like me. It could be on account of economic woes. How do you segregate? I know these issues are there, but how, in your prescription, how would you say that because of his living condition, this thing is come? So it must be relatable. Sure. Diseases and sanitary conditions. If you can specify that respiratory diseases will come on account of this, or extreme heat over a period of time, it all requires scientific study and some kind of formulation. Well, I think I have two people here who got to pay me for this session, and they are staring at me. But I think we need to ask about one or two questions from this audience. Otherwise, they'll say that we are most undemocratic. The lady first, and then the gentleman here.
Good afternoon, Karuna. I'm a startup founder. And my question is related to virtual power plants with respect to pilot wheels. When will we start seeing larger virtual power plant pilots in India? And what are the regulatory challenges? What is going on? When will the regulations be out? If ISA has visibility, so you think
Virtual power plants.
virtual power plants. So if you have any.
I mean, what do you mean by virtual? They don't exist actually only on paper. There are quite a few. There are quite a few assets in India like that. I can assure you, but no, please clarify what exactly.
Yes, so virtual power plants are basically, they are already happening since years in US and Europe. The idea is basically decentralized renewable energy sources and the storage sources that you have at the end of consumer. The idea is to aggregate those through a software IoT kind of platform, and basically the utility or the aggregator uses that to manage their purchase from the power markets, or they are able to reduce their purchase from the actual markets, or they are even able to dispatch it to the markets. So that kind of where you have time of day pricing and the incentives are tied.
So thank you. Great question, and I think what is needed before you can actually go for a regulation is the digital public infrastructure. I mean, how do you integrate all these various disaggregated power plants at various different locations? So I think the first step, and if you have seen, Ministry of Power has already set up an expert committee for creating this India Energy Stack. I believe this is one of the agenda items that it is deliberating. Hopefully, anytime soon, certainly in 2026. The work that we are doing, and sir, you talked about very rightly the pilot, the work that we along with ISA are doing, is we are about to complete the first pilot digital twin in Jaipur. The early results are amazing. We have been able to identify almost $100 million of savings only by optimization. We have not yet started using. So a Jaipur grid will be extremely amenable for a VPP to begin operations with, and slowly, hopefully, it will unfold into other parts of the grid as well.
No, but why did you choose Jaipur?
Because of leadership. because of leadership, we knew that we will succeed there. The additional chief secretary knew this subject very well. He knew the importance of
That's
this.
a good idea. You see, in all the sampling of the pilots, my suggestion to you is that you choose your replicable points. And why you chose a particular one should be very clear to you in the beginning, unless you just want to do a random selection. Because unless you lay down the basic parameters, like we go through a health examination, what are the parameters? And how were they rectified because of this thing? So that I would suggest, I'm sure you've done that, diagnostics. Until you do that kind of diagnostics, I think it may not lead to effective replication. That's what I feel.
So I have just a short follow-up question.
There is this gentleman, please settle with him. If you agree for giving him lunch.
So, my name is Akira Dudin. I have experience to share a very interesting point. We all know about rooftop solar, and it is a very vast mission which has been going since a long time. And we have heard about rural ecosystem. And my point is very interesting. The ecosystem, a very basic thing. They getting installed a rooftop solar, and they are getting net metering also, and they are getting utilized in their home also. But for the time they are not getting electricity, their recording goes zero. So, for example, in a daytime in a rural where they have a power cut of 4 hours or maybe 3 hours, almost 25% or 35% or 40% they are not getting what they should get. So, what payback time you are anticipating for 8 years or maybe 10 years, that is going double. So, that business is not flourishing just because of these minute things, which I think you have touched upon, that digitalization we are talking about. The meters we have, dual meters we have, they don't account the solar generation for the time there is no power. So these things.
You're right. I read about this problem. See, we have any new technology, we must find out these glitches. Otherwise, if there's a people's movement, it will stall that. And it will stop for all time to come. Very difficult to start the engine again. Do you have an answer to this?
I don't have an answer, but it's a right observation. That's one of the reasons why, the Kusum scheme, and you would have seen there was a lot of question around why is it that, such an ambitious scheme is not working with farmers. And one of the key, findings was these state level experiences that you shared where, power cuts happen at a time when net metering doesn't work for the farmers' benefit. So these are things which are coming up.
So with the permission of the chair, let me tell you the PM Suryaghar website that you see is all developed by us. It is maintained by us. And this is something that we are aware of. And through the Ministry of Renewables, we are now mandating for the new installations that there should be a sensor in the inverter itself for the all new ones, and we'll try and encourage others to also install it. So that this problem that you are saying rightly, that when the power is off, the meter is not running, we don't know. Plus, that's number one. Number two, hopefully in financial year 2026, the website will also track real-time consumption, generation and consumption data, so that more transparency, sir, as you have said, more data.
No, but you see, I don't see why you couldn't just not put a chip, a small chip. You don't need to go to the inverter or anything. Somebody. Okay, yeah, just put a chip there, which should have memory, which is a function assigned to it. I'm a very cautious man. I have not yet installed anything. Till I learn of your experiences and I find somebody who can give me subsidy. Lot of learning, precisely. He has hopes on. I mean, I've handled adult education at some stage in my life. I didn't know he knew about it. It was called broad shiksha, that's what the Janata government had just come in. I was director of education in my state. And in Haryana, the broad shiksha was per as you see. Anyway, they transformed it to fraud shiksha. Anyway, we had a lot of learning centers. After 2 years we learned, which were nothing but some party organizations, and people disappeared with a lot of money. When I came back to the department 4 years later, those charge sheets that I had instituted had still not been initiated. So I called them like this for lunch, and I said, yes, what can I do for you? Suddenly 4 or 5 of them got up, and the door was behind me. And I thought they're saying a walkout. They just came and grabbed my feet and said, sir, please forgive us. So I had to give a general amnesty because I got a call from my secretary. Please withdraw the charge sheets you issued 4 or 5 years ago. So anyway, any new thing that you do will run into some problems. It's a learning curve, and hopefully we should be receptive to these ideas and these complaints. It is too late. As I said, the treatment is good, but the patient will no longer be alive. Anyway, thank you very much. And I think there's one hesitant hand going up there. Between the two of you, decide the last question.
So I'll ask the last question.
That's why you know why partnerships are so difficult.
So there was a passing mention of urbanization and large part of the emission happening through urbanization, and most of India is yet to be urbanized. But urbanization is a phenomenon. I will not talk about the whole country, I'll just talk about the city where we are in right now, Delhi, National Capital Region. Where the real estate prices have gone, the average urban dweller has been priced out of the market. Which means that a large section of our urban population is actually living in urban villages, informal settlements. I don't know if any of us have actually gone inside those settlements. All the great things that we talk about in the new NBC or the evolving building bylaws, unfortunately none of them apply within those settlements. There's no natural light penetration. God forbid if there's an emergency, a fire tender actually can't go in. Lots of other issues, I won't go into the details. So, if 75% of the population in our city is going to be living in those settlements, and that is what is rapidly urbanizing, all of the great things that we implement or some of our real estate partners do is less than 10% of the built environment. Right. So isn't this now a losing battle already in terms of climate change and what this urbanization is doing to our cities? Anybody can answer that question.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that there's two sides to this. If you're thinking about winning or losing on the climate battle, so that 10% in terms of energy consumption and driving emissions is a major component of the emissions pie, particularly middle income residential. And that is indeed, I think all over the world, it's the same phenomenon that urban house prices are becoming unaffordable for the masses. And there are different side effects in different parts of the world. So if we're talking about winning on climate from the point of view of driving mitigation targets, we definitely have to be focusing on that 10%. But if we're thinking about the human rights to adequate housing, which are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are going to be failing if we don't pick the 75% up with us. And so, to your point, there is the need to use that awareness of vulnerability, the need for adaptation and empowerment at the community level to lift everybody up. There's some great examples. I used the point before about heat health, and there's some great examples of initiatives which are focusing on empowering communities to deal with extreme heat. But I think I've also seen in the world heat action plans which are being developed by cities around the world not being effectively implemented or looking great on paper. But it comes back to my point that we have to be on the ground. We have to have the boots on the ground. We have to go into those settlements and actually engage with those communities with data and things that actions that they can practically take. So it's a great point. I think winning on climate takes addressing both things at the same time.
It's a hard reality what you're mentioning. My take on it is why one of the possibilities, not the only one, is that you see we've eaten more than we can chew. What is the weakest link in the structure, I won't name the country in which we are living, is that the lowest rung is the weakest. We tend to give all powers to the center, which has no way to control what you're talking about. We have a city as large as Delhi. I was born in this city, I've seen it grow. It has become unmanageable proportions, and the first horror I had was when I took a helicopter ride with the Joint Secretary going to the Plenary project, which I was monitoring. And when we flew over, that was 25 years ago, I didn't realize that Delhi had expanded in that fashion. Totally disorganized, unorganized way. And I think, how do we strengthen those local bodies? Even one municipal corporation is very large. Those subsets. The village is always better contained and controlled. Why? Because they know what is happening there. Those who are responsible know what is happening there. I feel what has gone wrong with us is that we tend to control too much. And it's like a person having 20 children. And he will not even know their names when he goes to school to ask about their welfare. So, there is an optimal size that you can administer and control. Unless you have administrative mechanisms which ensure that you can administer those larger populations, reporting, surveillance. You have the tools today, but is anybody doing it? Even crime has the same problem. It's a neighborhood control issue. But when there is anonymity, everybody is free to behave the way he wants to. Anyway, I think we've overshot our time and we are not going to be paid overtime. He's waved his hand and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair. Thank you, eminent dignitaries, panelists here. We'll take up the questions during the lunchtime. Please, I request all of you. I'm sure
I'll give you
everyone
my
is
visiting card. No, please call me for lunch one day and we'll have half an hour.
We will take this up during the lunch, sir. Everyone is really happy. Thank you so much. And on that note, I request our chair, Mr. Anil Rasan, sir, to please felicitate our dignitaries, our panelists. I request my team to please do the honors. We have with us Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Vice President. Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Vice President, Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet India. Thank you, sir. Dr. Peter Graham, CEO, Global Buildings Performance Network. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Ms. Namrata Mukherjee, Strategic Planning Specialist, International Solar Alliance. And Ms. Gagandeep K. Buller, Founder and CEO, Superhuman Race Private Limited. I now request Mr. Sanjay Seth, Vice President and CEO, Griha Council, to please I request Mr. Sanjay Seth to please present a token of gratitude to our esteemed chair of the session, Mr. Anil Rastan sir, former Secretary, Ministry of Power, Government of India. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, panelists and the chair. With this, we conclude the plenary session 1. I invite you all for the lunch outside in the hub area. And we will begin with our plenary session 2 at 2:45 here at Silver Oak. I request everyone to please be here by 2:45. Thank you.